My name is Caleb Morgan, 33 years old, and I have always been the one who shows up for my family even when they fail to acknowledge me. When my sister got accepted to her dream program in Vancouver, Canada, I happily spent $800–900 to help her relocate. I paid for everything from her business class flight to apartment deposits. Then, the morning of her farewell party, I received a text from my mother that shattered my heart. "You are not invited. Family only." I stared at my phone wondering if I am not family. Then what exactly am I to them? Trust me. You will want to hear how I responded when my own family excluded me after taking my money. To understand why this exclusion hurt so deeply, I need to tell you about my family. I was adopted when I was 5 years old by Karen, now 57, and Stephen, 60. They already had a biological daughter, Megan, who is now 27, 6 years younger than me. From the beginning, the dynamic was clear. Megan was the princess, the real daughter, while I was, well, the other one. Growing up, I noticed the subtle and not so subtle ways I was treated differently. Megan's birthday parties were extravagant affairs with themes, entertainment, and custom cakes. My birthdays were acknowledged with a store-bought cake and maybe a small family dinner if I was lucky. It was as if celebrating my existence was an obligation rather than a joy. The family photos that lined our hallway told their own story. There were dozens of pictures of Megan at various ages, some of Karen and Stephen together, and family portraits of the three of them. Pictures with me included were rare, usually taken at major events, where excluding me would have been too obvious. I remember once asking my mother why there were so few photos of me. She laughed it off, saying, "You were always running around, never sitting still for pictures." But I remember sitting still, waiting to be included. Family vacations were another area where the differences became apparent. Sometimes plans would be made without even consulting me, as if my schedule or preferences did not matter. I would often discover these plans accidentally overhearing conversations or seeing preparations around the house. When I asked about them, the response was usually along the lines of, "Oh, we thought you would be busy with school or work." I learned early on that I needed to be self-sufficient. When college applications came around, Megan was guided through every step by our parents. They hired tutors, helped her with essays, and took her on campus tours. For me, it was, "You are smart, Caleb. You will figure it out." And I did. I applied for scholarships, worked part-time jobs throughout high school to save money, and researched schools on my own. I ended up paying for most of my education myself through a combination of scholarship student loans and working multiple jobs. My relationship with Megan has always been complicated. As children, there were moments of genuine sibling connection, but they became rarer as we grew older. By the time she was a teenager, Megan had fully embraced her role as the golden child. She began to see me as someone she could use rather than someone to bond with. It started with small things, borrowing clothes without asking, taking money from my wallet for emergencies that were never explained using my laptop, and returning it with mysterious stains or damage. When I confronted her, she would either deny it or dismiss my concerns as me being too uptight. As adults, the pattern continued but evolved. Megan would call me when she needed something, money for rent, help, moving rides to the airport, or emotional support after a breakup. I always showed up hoping that each act of kindness would strengthen our bond, would make her see me as her brother rather than her personal ATM. "Caleb, I promise I will pay you back next month when I get that bonus," she would say, her voice sweet and convincing. Next month would come and go, and when I mentioned the loan, she would look hurt. "I cannot believe you are bringing that up. You know things have been tight for me lately. Is money really that important to you?" And I would back down, feeling guilty for even asking. The truth was, it was never about the money. It was about the respect, about her keeping her word, about her valuing me enough to honor her commitments. Despite all this, there were rare moments that kept me hanging on. Moments when Megan seemed to genuinely care, like the time she showed up at my apartment with soup when I had the flu, or when she defended me at a family gathering when an aunt made a comment about adoption. In those fleeting instances, I got a glimpse of what having a real sister might feel like, and it made all the disappointments easier to bear. While my relationship with my family was strained, I found success in my professional life. I graduated with honors and built a solid career in finance. By 28, I had purchased my own home, a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom condo in a nice neighborhood. I had a decent amount in savings and had established myself as someone reliable and competent in both my personal and professional circles. My family's reaction to my success was tepid at best. There were no celebration dinners, no proud Facebook posts like the ones that accompanied Megan's every achievement. My mother once commented that I was lucky to have a job that paid so well, as if my years of hard work and dedication had nothing to do with it. Despite their lukewarm support, I continued to help them financially. When my father needed a new car, I helped with the down payment. When my mother wanted to renovate the kitchen, I contributed a significant amount. Each time I told myself I was being generous, but deep down I knew I was still that little boy trying to buy his way into being loved. "You are so good with money, Caleb." My mother would say, not "thank you" or "we appreciate you," but "you are good with money," as if my value lays solely in what I could provide. And I accepted it because having some role in the family, even if it was just as the financial safety net, seemed better than having no role at all. The story that led to my heartbreak began at a family dinner. It was one of our rare gatherings where everyone was in a good mood. My father had grilled steaks, my mother had made her famous potato salad, and Megan had brought a bottle of wine. I had brought a homemade cheesecake that no one except my father complimented. As we were finishing our meal, Megan cleared her throat dramatically. "I have some news," she announced, her eyes bright with excitement. We all looked at her expectantly. I got accepted to the Pacific Art and Design Fellowship in Vancouver. I will be studying under some of the best designers in North America for a full year. The table erupted in excitement. My parents were hugging her, asking questions about the program, already planning visits to Canada. I was genuinely happy for her, too. Megan had always been talented, and despite our complicated relationship, I wanted her to succeed. "When do you leave?" I asked, once the initial excitement had died down. "In 3 months," she replied. "But there is one small problem." Karen and Stephen exchanged concerned glances. "The program acceptance does not come with financial assistance," Megan explained, her voice dropping. "I need to cover my own travel expenses, housing deposit, and living costs until I can find a part-time job there." My parents looked worried. My father had retired last year, and while they were comfortable, they did not have a lot of extra money for unexpected expenses. "How much are we talking about?" my mother asked cautiously. Megan named a figure that made my parents, yes. It was clear they wanted to help but were concerned about their ability to do so. I do not know what possessed me in that moment. Maybe it was the genuine excitement I had seen in Megan's eyes. Or maybe it was my lifelong desire to be acknowledged as a real member of the family. Whatever it was, I heard myself say, "I can help." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. "I can cover your flight, the apartment deposit, and some initial expenses," I elaborated. "I have been saving for a vacation, but this is more important." The look of shock on their faces was almost comical. It was as if they had forgotten I was at the table, or perhaps they were just surprised by my generosity given how Megan had treated me over the years. Megan was the first to recover. She jumped up from her chair and rushed around the table to hug me. "Oh my God, Caleb, are you serious? That would be amazing. I promise I will pay you back every penny once I get established." It was a promise I had heard many times before. But in that moment, with her arms around me and the genuine gratitude in her voice, I believed her. For once, I felt like a valued member of the family, not just the adopted outsider. My parents added their thanks, though I noticed my mother's seemed more reserved than my father's. Still, it was a rare moment of familial harmony, and I savored it. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into helping Megan prepare for her Vancouver adventure. I spent hours researching safe neighborhoods that would still be within her budget. I joined online forums for expatriates living in Vancouver to get advice about banking, healthcare, and transportation. I wanted everything to be perfect for her. After extensive research, I found a small but charming one-bedroom apartment in a safe area with good public transportation connections to her school. The rent was reasonable by Vancouver standards, which meant it was still outrageously expensive by our city's standards. The landlord required a $3,500 deposit plus the first month's rent up front. Since Megan had no credit history in Canada and limited income, I agreed to co-sign the lease. This meant my name would be on the rental agreement alongside hers, making me equally responsible for payments and any damages. It seemed like a reasonable risk at the time, given how excited and committed Megan was to making this work. I also helped her navigate the complicated Canadian visa process, spending countless hours filling out forms, gathering supporting documents, and making sure everything was submitted correctly and on time. When small obstacles arose, I was the one who found solutions. When her passport renewal was delayed, I was the one who made calls and expedited the process. What had started as an estimated $5,500 contribution gradually increased as unexpected expenses kept popping up. Megan decided she needed a business class ticket because the extra space will help me arrive, rested, and make a good first impression. That added an extra $300 to the flight cost. Then there was furniture. The apartment came partially furnished, but Megan insisted she needed a better mattress, a high-quality standing desk for her design work, and various decorative items to create an inspiring environment. Another $600. A new laptop with special graphics capabilities for her digital art classes, $950. Art supplies that were much better quality in America, and therefore needed to be purchased before departure, $650. By the time all was said and done, I had spent $900, most of it from my savings account. I had to cancel my own planned vacation to Key West, Florida, something I had been looking forward to for months after a particularly stressful period at work. But seeing Megan's excitement made it feel worthwhile. For once, I was doing something that seemed to genuinely bring us closer as siblings. "You are literally making my dreams come true," Megan told me one evening as we were looking at photos of her soon-to-be neighborhood in Vancouver. She squeezed my hand affectionately. "I do not know what I would do without you, Caleb." It was exactly what I had always wanted to hear, and it made all the sacrifices seem worthwhile. With just 2 weeks left before Megan's departure, preparations were in full swing. One afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some travel adapters I had purchased for Megan. As I approached the kitchen, I overheard my mother and sister discussing plans for a farewell party. "We should do it at the Copper Oak," Megan was saying, referring to her favorite steakhouse. "Their private room would be perfect." "That might be expensive," my mother replied. "But I suppose we could make it work for your special night?" I entered the kitchen, excited by the idea. "A farewell party sounds wonderful. I would be happy to help organize it." There was an awkward pause before my mother forced a smile. "That is very kind of you, Caleb. We are just brainstorming ideas right now." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. "Well, I would love to help. The Copper Oak's private room is actually reasonable if you book it on a Thursday instead of a weekend. And I know the manager there from some work events I have organized." My mother and Megan exchanged a glance I could not quite interpret, but then Megan smiled. "That would be great, actually. Thanks, Caleb." Over the next week, I threw myself into planning the perfect farewell party. I secured the private room at the Copper Oak at a discounted rate, created a beautiful invitation to send to family and friends, and worked with the chef to create a menu that included all of Megan's favorite dishes. I even arranged for a special dessert that featured an edible map of Vancouver with landmarks made of chocolate. I also spent hours selecting the perfect going-away gift. I wanted something meaningful, something that would remind Megan of home while she was abroad. I finally decided on an engraved minimalist leather passport wallet with a custom compass charm. Expensive, but I wanted her to have something special from me, something that symbolized our connection despite the distance that would soon separate us. As the party approached, my mother and I had several conversations about the guest list. We included family members, Megan's close friends, and some of her former professors who had supported her art career. My mother seemed oddly evasive during these conversations, never quite giving definitive answers about certain guests. But I attributed it to the general stress of planning and Megan's impending departure. The night before the party, I went to bed feeling genuinely happy. For once, I was fully included in an important family event. I had contributed meaningfully, and my efforts were acknowledged, if not effusively praised. I fell asleep thinking that perhaps this was a turning point in my relationship with my family, that Megan's departure might somehow bring the rest of us closer together. I could not have been more wrong. The morning of the party, I woke up early, excited about the evening ahead. I had planned to get my hair cut and had bought a new jacket for the occasion. As I was sipping my first cup of coffee and mentally going through my to-do list for the day, my phone pinged with a text message from my mother. I opened it, expecting some last-minute question about the party arrangements. Instead, what I read made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. About tonight's party, we have decided to keep it to just immediate family. It would not be appropriate for you to attend. Megan wants an intimate evening with her family before she leaves. I hope you understand. I stared at the message, reading it over and over, convinced I must be misinterpreting it somehow. Surely my mother was not telling me the person who had planned the party and spent thousands of dollars to make Megan's Vancouver dream possible that I was not welcome at the farewell dinner. With shaking hands, I typed a response. I do not understand. Am I not family too? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, a new message. You know what I mean, Caleb? This is about blood family. Please do not make this difficult. Blood family. The words hit me like a physical blow. After 28 years as their son, I was still an outsider. I was good enough to provide financial support, good enough to handle all the practical arrangements, but not good enough to be included in the celebration. I was still staring at my phone in disbelief when it rang. It was my mother calling. I almost did not answer, but some masochistic part of me needed to hear her explain herself. "Hello," I said, my voice barely audible. "Caleb." My mother began, sounding irritated rather than apologetic. "Why are you making this awkward?" "I am making it awkward," I managed to respond, my voice breaking. "You just told me I am not welcome at a party I organized because I am not real family." "That is not what I said," she snapped. "I said immediate family. You know, blood relatives. Megan's grandparents are coming and her cousins from both sides of the family. She wants to spend her last night with her biological family. I do not see why that is so hard for you to understand." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back tears because I thought I was family too. "I have been your son for 28 years. There was a pause. Then my mother sighed. "Of course you are family, Caleb. Just a different kind of family. Megan wants her last night to be with the people she has known literally her entire life. The people she has known her entire life," I repeated slowly. "Unlike me, who only entered her life when she was 2. "Exactly," my mother said, seemingly oblivious to the pain in my voice. "I am glad you understand. It would just be uncomfortable for everyone if you were there. Megan wants to be able to reminisce about family vacations and traditions without having to worry about making you feel included." I held my breath, trying desperately not to break down while still on the phone. Every word from my mother was another cut deeper and more painful than the last. "I see," I finally managed to say. "Good," my mother replied, sounding relieved. "I knew you would be reasonable about this. You always are. That is what we love about you, Caleb. You never make things about yourself." After a few more platitudes about how much they appreciated all I had done for Megan, my mother ended the call. As soon as the connection was broken, so was my composure. I sank to the kitchen floor, phone still clutched in my hand, and sobbed. All the years of feeling like an outsider, all the moments of exclusion and differentiation, all the times I had told myself I was being oversensitive or reading too much into things came crashing down around me. It had not been in my head. I really was considered less than other than not quite family. And the worst part, they had no problem taking my money, accepting my help, utilizing my organizational skills, and then casting me aside when it came time for the celebration. I was a resource to them, not a relative. I cried until I had no tears left, sitting on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. My coffee grew cold on the counter, forgotten. The beautiful new jacket hanging in my closet, carefully selected for a party I would never attend, seemed to mock me from across the apartment. When the tears finally subsided, I picked up my phone again, scrolling through old photos. There I was at Megan's high school graduation, beaming with pride as I stood slightly apart from the rest of the family. There I was at Christmas, always the one taking the photos rather than being in them. There I was helping Megan move into her college dorm, carrying boxes while my parents posed with her for pictures in her new room. The pattern was so clear now, so undeniable. How had I missed it for so long? Or rather, why had I allowed myself to ignore what was right in front of me? A new emotion began to rise within me, pushing through the hurt and sadness, anger. Pure righteous anger at how I had been treated not just today, but for most of my life. I had given and given and given, desperately hoping for scraps of affection in return, and they could not even include me in a dinner I had arranged myself. I dialed the number of Ryan, my best friend since college and one of the few people who had always seen my worth clearly. "Hey, what is up? Excited about the party tonight?" Ryan's advice rose in disbelief as I finished explaining. "They did what?" "After you spent over $8,500 to help Megan move to Vancouver, after you planned the entire farewell party, they are saying you are not family enough to attend." "That is pretty much it," I confirmed, my voice raw from crying. "Caleb, listen to me," Ryan said firmly. "This is not okay. This is beyond not okay. This is emotional abuse, and you do not have to accept it." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "They are my family." "Are they, though?" Ryan challenged Mara. "Because from where I am sitting, they are treating you like an ATM, not a son or a brother. Family does not do this to each other. They took your money for the Vancouver move." Ryan continued, anger evident in his voice. "They let you plan and pay for this party, and then they have the audacity to tell you that you are not family enough to attend. No, absolutely not." "I feel like such a fool," I whispered. "You are not a fool, Caleb. You are a kind, generous person who wanted to believe the best about people who do not deserve you. But it is time to stop letting them take advantage of that kindness." "What should I do?" I asked again. But this time, the question felt different. I was not asking how to fix the situation with my family. I was asking how to fix myself. How to stop being the person who accepted this treatment. "First, you respect yourself enough to not let this slide," Ryan advised. "You do not beg for a place at their table. You build your own table. And second, if I were you, I would seriously reconsider that financial help you have been providing." After talking with Ryan for nearly an hour, I felt stronger, more centered. I was still hurt, devastatingly so, but the helplessness was receding, replaced by a growing sense of resolve. I needed to clear my head to process everything that had happened and decide on my next steps. I changed into comfortable clothes and left my apartment for a long walk in the nearby park, leaving my phone behind so I would not be tempted to read any more hurtful messages, or worse, send emotional responses I might later regret. The park was quiet on a weekday morning. I found a secluded bench near the small lake and sat down watching ducks glide peacefully across the water. How simple their lives seemed compared to the complicated mess of human relationships. As I sat there, I allowed myself to really reflect on my relationship with my family. I thought about all the times I had tried so hard to be included, all the ways I had contorted myself to fit into the space they allocated for me. I had been trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I remembered my 10th birthday when I had overheard my mother telling a friend that they did not really do big celebrations for Caleb because I was already so independent. I remembered my high school graduation when my parents had seemed more focused on making sure Megan, then 12, was entertained than on celebrating my achievement. I remembered countless family gatherings where I had felt like a guest rather than a member of the family, and I thought about all the money I had spent trying to buy my way into their hearts. The gifts that were received with tepid thanks, the vacations I had helped fund the repairs on the family home I had paid for, and now the $8,500 for Megan's Vancouver adventure, which apparently did not even earn me a seat at her farewell dinner. By the time I stood up from that bench, something had shifted inside me. I was done being the family doormat. I was done accepting scraps of affection in exchange for significant portions of my time, energy, and finances. I was done pretending that the dynamic was normal or acceptable. I walked back to my apartment with purpose in my step. I had made a decision. I would not confront them with anger or demand explanations. I would not create a scene or beg for inclusion. I would simply stop participating in a system that was designed to exploit my generosity and need for belonging. Back in my apartment, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. It was time to take action. I began by checking the details of all the financial arrangements I had made for Megan's Vancouver, move the lease agreement with my name as a co-signer, the bank transfers for the deposit and first month's rent, the airline reservation for her business class flight. Then I checked the time. It was 11:45 at night. I had exactly 15 minutes before midnight, which would mark the beginning of a new billing cycle for my credit card and the final deadline for making changes to the airline reservation. It was now or never. I had carefully checked the cancellation policies, and all expenses could be partially refunded or postponed to ensure fairness for both parties. With 15 minutes until midnight, I made my first call to the airline. I explained that I needed to cancel a ticket I had purchased. There would be a $400 non-refundable fee, but the remainder would be returned to my credit card. I confirmed the cancellation and requested an email confirmation. Next, I called the property management company handling the Vancouver apartment. This was trickier since it was already morning in Canada. I was put on hold several times as my call was transferred to different departments. Finally, I reached someone who could help me. I explained that I needed to remove my name from the lease agreement immediately before any funds were transferred. "May I ask why Mr. Hugh Hayes?" the woman on the other end of the line asked. "Personal reasons," I replied firmly. "I am no longer in a position to be financially responsible for this property." She informed me that removing my name would invalidate the entire agreement unless Miss Megan Harper could qualify for the lease on her own income or find another co-signer. I confirmed that I understood this and proceeded. While on hold again, I logged into my online banking account and put a freeze on all pending international transfers related to the Vancouver move. I had set up several automatic payments to help Megan with her first few months of rent and utilities. All of those were now paused. Over the next few intense days, I tirelessly called, emailed, and monitored each step to ensure everything was handled before the deadline. By the time I finished the call with the property management company, it was 11:58. With just 2 minutes to spare, I sent emails to both the airline and the property managers confirming our conversations and requesting written verification of the changes I had made. Then, in a final, decisive move, I blocked Megan's number on my phone. I hesitated before doing the same for my parents, but ultimately decided to block my mother's number as well. I left my father's unblocked, not because I expected anything different from him, but because he had always been slightly less dismissive of me than my mother had been. As the clock struck midnight, I closed my laptop and let out a long, shaky breath. What I had just done felt both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself against my family's treatment. I had said no more, not with words which could be argued away or dismissed, but with actions that could not be ignored. I expected to feel guilty or anxious, but instead I felt a strange sense of peace washing over me. It was as if I had been carrying a heavy burden for years without realizing it, and had suddenly put it down. My shoulders literally felt lighter. That night I slept better than I had in weeks, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep almost as soon as my head hit the pillow. It was the sleep of someone who had finally acknowledged a painful truth and taken steps to address it rather than continuing to live in denial. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing repeatedly with incoming messages. Since I had blocked both Megan and my mother, these were coming from numbers I did not recognize. I picked up my phone cautiously and began to read. "What the hell did you do?" The apartment manager just called me saying our lease is invalid. This was from a number I did not recognize, but the tone was unmistakably Megan's. She must be using a friend's phone to bypass my block. Another message followed. "Answer me. My flight reservation is canceled too. What is wrong with you?" And another, "You cannot just back out like this. We had an agreement. I am going to sue you for this." The threats continued, growing increasingly desperate and angry. Megan accused me of sabotage, of jealousy, of trying to ruin her career before it even started. She threatened legal action, public humiliation, telling everyone in our extended family what a psycho I was. Then came messages from various relatives, most of whom rarely contacted me except when they needed something. "My Aunt Linda. What did you do to poor Megan? She is devastated. My cousin Evan. Not cool, Caleb. Really not cool. Even my grandmother, who usually stayed out of family drama. Your sister needs your help. Family supports family." That last one almost broke me. Family supports family. Where was that sentiment when I was being excluded from the farewell dinner? Where was that sentiment through all the years of subtle and not so subtle reminders that I was different, less than not quite a real Harper? I put my phone down without responding to any of the messages and made myself breakfast. As I ate, I reviewed my actions from the night before and found that I still felt they were justified. I had not acted out of spite or revenge. I had simply removed myself from a situation where I was being exploited and disrespected. If that created problems for Megan and my parents, well, that was unfortunate but not my responsibility to fix. Throughout the day, the messages continued to pour in. Some were angry, some pleading, some manipulative in their attempts to make me feel guilty. By evening, I had received over 30 messages from various family members and Megan's friends, all demanding explanations or expressing disappointment in me. I responded to none of them. What could I say that would make them understand? They had never seen the dynamic from my perspective before. Why would they start now? Instead, I wrote in my journal documenting everything that had happened, how I felt, and why I had made the decisions I had. It was cathartic to see it all laid out on paper to validate my own experiences and feelings after years of having them dismissed or minimized. Just before midnight, as I was preparing for bed, my phone rang. It was my father, Thomas. I had not blocked his number, though I had not expected him to call either. Thomas had always been the quieter parent, more often going along with my mother's decisions than asserting his own opinions. I hesitated, then answered. "Caleb," he said, his voice sounding tired and old. "We need to talk about what you have done." I braced myself for the accusations, the guilt trip, the demands that I fix everything immediately. But instead, there was a long pause. And then, "I just want you to know that I understand." I was so shocked I could not speak. "Your mother and Megan are furious." "Of course," he continued. "The Vancouver plans are in chaos, but I cannot say I blame you after what they did. You know about the party I managed to ask." "Yes, I was not consulted about that decision. When I found out they had excluded you, I told them it was wrong. We argued about it, but you know how your mother gets when she has made up her mind. I did know. Karen's stubbornness was legendary in our family. Dad, I started, but he cut me off. No, let me finish. I need to say this. I have not been the father you deserved, Caleb. I have allowed your mother and Megan to treat you as less than, and I have not stood up for you when I should have. I am sorry for that. Truly sorry. I felt tears welling up again. But these were different from the tears I had cried the day before. These were tears of validation of finally being seen. So you are not angry about the money about me backing out of the Vancouver arrangements, I asked cautiously. He sighed heavily. I am disappointed that it came to this. But no, I am not angry at you. I am angry at myself and at your mother and at Megan. We have taken you for granted for too long, and yesterday was apparently the final straw. You deserve better than what this family has given you, Caleb, and I am sorry it took something this dramatic for me to say that to you. After we hung up, I played his voice message again, making sure I had heard correctly. It was the first time in my life that one of my parents had acknowledged the unfairness of my treatment within the family. It was the first time I'd been told that my feelings were valid, that I deserved better. I went to bed that night with mixed emotions. The hurt was still there, but alongside it was a small growing sense of vindication, and even more surprisingly, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, something good might come from all of this pain. The day after my conversation with my father, he texted asking if we could meet for coffee. I was hesitant but agreed to meet him at a cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, I spotted him immediately sitting at a corner table with 2 cups already in front of him. He looked tired, with new lines around his eyes and mouth that I had not noticed before. I ordered your usual, he said as I sat down. Vanilla latte with an extra shot, right? I was surprised he remembered. Yes, thank you. For a moment we sat in awkward silence, neither sure how to begin. Finally my father cleared his throat. Megan is still going to Vancouver, he said. I have arranged to cover the costs. She leaves in 3 days. I nodded, feeling a slight twinge of guilt that I quickly suppressed. I am glad she can still go. Despite everything, I do want her to have this opportunity. My father looked at me with a sad smile. You have always been the bigger person even now after how she has treated you. I shrugged, uncomfortable with his praise. What happens now? He took a deep breath. That depends on you. Your mother is still well. She is angry. She feels you acted impulsively and vindictively. And what do you think I challenged? I think you reached your breaking point, he replied honestly. And I think it was a long time coming. He went on to tell me about the aftermath of my decision. Apparently, there had been a huge fight at home after my mother discovered what I had done. For the first time ever, my father had stood up to her about her treatment of me. I told her she had pushed you away with her favoritism, he admitted. I told her that excluding you from the party after all you had done was cruel and thoughtless. How did she take that, I asked, trying to imagine my mother accepting any criticism. Not well, he said with a rueful smile. She accused me of choosing you over Megan, which is ironic considering how things have always been. But after she calmed down, I think some of what I said got through. She would never admit it, but she has been quieter, more reflective these past 2 days. What he said next shocked me even more. There is something you should know, Caleb, about the party exclusion. It was not Megan's idea to keep it to blood family only. That was your mother's decision. But she said Megan wanted an intimate evening with just family, I protested. My father shook his head. That was your mother's interpretation. What Megan actually said was that she wanted a small gathering with the people closest to her. Your mother took that and ran with it, deciding that meant blood relatives only. Why would she do that? He looked uncomfortable. This is hard for me to say, but I think your mother has always been jealous of you in some ways. Jealous of me. I could not hide my disbelief. You are successful, independent, financially stable. You have built a life for yourself without much help from us. Your mother, She dropped out of college to have Megan. She has always defined herself through her role as Megan's mother. And when Megan looks up to you or comes to you for help instead of her, she feels threatened. I finished beginning to understand. Yes, it is not right, and it is not fair to you, but I think that is part of the dynamic. As we were talking, the cafe door opened, and to my shock, Megan walked in. She spotted us immediately and headed straight for our table. Her expression a mix of anger and something else I could not quite identify. "I thought I would find you here," she said to our father. Then she turned to me. "We need to talk. Megan, this is not the time," my father began, but she cut him off. "No, it is exactly the time. Before I leave for Vancouver, we need to clear the air." She pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. Megan had heard from Stephen about what I had discovered and came to confront us directly before leaving for Vancouver. Up close, I could see that her eyes were red-rimmed as if she had been crying. "What you did was messed up." She began, her voice tight with emotion. "You knew how important Vancouver is to me, and you knew how important it was to me to be included in your life." I met her gaze steadily. "Yet you were fine with me being excluded from your farewell dinner after I planned it and paid for it. I did not know Mom told you not to come until after it happened," Megan exclaimed. "I asked her where you were, and she said you had other plans." I looked at my father for confirmation, and he nodded slightly. "It is true. Megan was asking about you at the dinner." This new information threw me. I had been so hurt, so angry, that I had assumed Megan was complicit in my exclusion. Finding out she had been misled too complicated the narrative I had constructed. "Even if that is true," I said slowly, "it does not change the fact that I have always been treated as less than family. You have taken my money, my help, my support without ever truly reciprocating." Megan looked down at her hands. "I know I have been a terrible sister," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I have taken advantage of your generosity. I have treated you like an ATM instead of a brother." Her candor surprised me. Megan had never been one to admit fault easily. "Why?" I asked simply. She looked up, tears in her eyes now. "Because it was easier than admitting how much I envied you, how intimidated I was by you. You have always been so capable, so together. I am a mess in comparison." "That is not true," I protested automatically. "It is," she insisted. "You put yourself through school, you have a successful career, you own your own home. Meanwhile, I am 26 and still need my big brother to bail me out financially. Do you know how that feels?" For the first time, I considered that perhaps Megan's perspective of our relationship was as skewed as mine had been. Where I had seen the golden child who got everything while I got nothing, she had seen someone whose accomplishments she could never match. "I never meant to make you feel that way," I said quietly. "And I never meant to make you feel like you were not family," she replied. "When Mom told me this morning what she had done, that she had told you not to come to the dinner, I was furious. I yelled at her for the first time ever. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. Megan had always been the peacemaker, avoiding confrontation, especially with our mother. "Look," Megan continued, "I understand why you pulled your support for Vancouver. I do not like it, but I get it. And I want you to know that I am going to pay back every cent that Dad is now spending to him and to you eventually for all the money you already spent on me. I promise." It was a promise I had heard before, but something in her tone felt different this time, more sincere, less automatic. "I would like to believe that," I said cautiously. "You have no reason to," she acknowledged. "I have broken every promise I ever made to you, but I am going to prove it to you starting now." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a signed letter stating that I will repay Dad in full, and then I will begin repaying you. I have asked him to hold me accountable and to withhold future support if I do not stick to the payment plan." I took the paper, surprised by this concrete step. It was so unlike the vague promises of the past. "I do not expect us to fix everything today," Megan added. "Trust takes time to rebuild, and I have a lot to make up for, but I want you to know that I never ever wanted you excluded from my life, or from that dinner. You are my brother Caleb, my real brother." The conversation continued for over 2 hours. We talked about old hurts and misunderstandings, about the times we had failed each other, and the rare moments of genuine connection. We cried. We laughed a little, and slowly, cautiously, we began to imagine what a healthier relationship might look like moving forward. By the end, I had made some decisions. I would not reverse my financial decisions. That boundary needed to remain firm, but I would leave the door open for Megan to prove that she meant what she said about changing our dynamic. I would attend her rescheduled farewell dinner now planned for her final night before departure. And I would try, with clear eyes and firm boundaries, to build a new kind of relationship with my family, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and exploitation. I cannot promise that everything will be perfect right away. I told them both as we prepared to leave. I need time to heal, and I need to see real changes, not just words. "We understand," my father said, and Megan nodded in agreement. "But I am willing to try," I added. "Because despite everything, you are my family, and I want that to mean something good." As I walked home from that meeting, I felt neither the crushing pain of before nor the righteous anger that had followed. Instead, I felt something more complex, cautious hope mixed with healthy skepticism. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in my life, I was walking it as an equal, not as someone desperately seeking approval. 6 months passed, bringing changes I could never have predicted on that painful morning when I received my mother's excluding text. Megan did make it to Vancouver, though not with my financial support. My father helped her secure a smaller apartment and a more modest lifestyle than she had originally planned. She flew economy instead of business class and bought second-hand furniture instead of new. My relationship with my mother, Linda, remained strained, though not severed. Our conversations were polite but guarded. She never offered a direct apology for excluding me from the farewell dinner, but she did make small gestures that suggested some recognition of her actions. She began to invite me to family gatherings with explicit, personalized invitations. She asked about my work and seemed to genuinely listen to my answers. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. My father and I grew closer than we had ever been. He made a conscious effort to spend one-on-one time with me, meeting regularly for coffee or lunch. He shared stories about my early days with the family that he had never told before, filling in gaps in my understanding of my own history. And most importantly, he acknowledged the ways in which the family dynamic had been unfair to me, and took responsibility for his part in it. As for Megan, she surprised me the most. Vancouver changed her in ways none of us had anticipated. Away from the family dynamic where she had always been the center of attention, she found herself having to stand on her own merits. According to my father, she struggled at first, unused to not having everything handed to her. But gradually she adjusted and even thrived. 3 months into her program, I received a handwritten letter from her. Not an email or a text, but an actual letter on heavy stationery with a Vancouver postmark. Inside was a check for $500, the first installment of her promised repayment, along with a note. "Dear Caleb, this is the first of many payments to come. I know money alone cannot repair our relationship, but I want you to know I am serious about making amends. Vancouver is teaching me so much, not just about design, but about myself. For the first time, I'm having to earn people's respect rather than expecting it as my due. It makes me appreciate even more how hard you have worked for everything you have achieved. I miss you, and hope one day you can visit me here not as my financial supporter, but as my brother and friend. Love, Megan." I cried when I read her letter, not from pain this time, but from a tentative sense of healing. I did not cash the check right away. It sat on my desk for weeks as I considered what it represented. In the end, I decided to deposit it into a separate savings account. If Megan continued to make payments, I would use the money to visit her in Vancouver, turning what had been a source of pain into an opportunity for growth. As for me, the most profound changes happened internally after the initial shock and hurt subsided. I realized that the experience had forced me to confront patterns I had participated in for decades. I had been trying to buy love and acceptance, and in doing so, I had enabled my own mistreatment. With this awareness, I sought out therapy to help me process my feelings and establish healthier patterns. My therapist helped me understand that while I could not control how others treated me, I could control how I responded and what behaviors I accepted. She helped me practice setting boundaries not just with my family, but in all my relationships. I learned to recognize my own worth independent of what I could provide for others. I learned that saying no did not make me selfish or unloving. It made me a person with healthy self-respect. I learned that real love does not come with conditions or price tags. As I healed, I also expanded my definition of family. Ryan, my best friend who had supported me through the crisis, became even more important in my life. I reconnected with cousins on my father's side, who had always been kind to me but whom I had drifted away from. Over the years, I became more involved in my community, volunteering at a local literacy program, where I met people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. I found myself in a place I never thought possible. 48 tells 32. The pain had not disappeared entirely and probably never would, but it no longer dominated my thoughts or dictated my actions. I had established clearer boundaries with Karen and Megan, which paradoxically led to more authentic, if less frequent, interactions. I had deepened my relationship with Stephen, finding forgiveness for his past failures as he worked to be better in the present. Most importantly, I had found a peace within myself that was not dependent on external validation. I no longer needed my adopted family to prove I belonged. I knew who I was and what I deserved. The lesson I learned through all of this was profound. True family is not defined by blood or legal documents. It is defined by respect, mutual support, and love that does not come with conditions. Sometimes the family we are born or adopted into fulfills this definition, and sometimes it does not. Sometimes we have to create our own version of family with the people who truly see and value us. I also learned that it is never too late to break destructive patterns. The dynamic in my family had been established over decades. Yet it changed dramatically once I found the courage to say enough. That courage did not come easily, and the aftermath was painful. But the growth it enabled was worth every difficult moment, and perhaps the most important lesson was about self-worth. For too long, I had tied my value to what I could provide for others, especially my family. I had believed that generosity without limits would eventually earn me the love and acceptance I craved. But real love cannot be bought or earned. It can only be freely given and received between equals who respect each other's boundaries. Today, I no longer see myself as the outsider desperately trying to buy a place at the family table. I am building my own table, inviting those who truly care about me to join and discovering that there is more than enough room for everyone who brings love rather than expectations. Not all blood relatives are family, and not all family shares the same blood. I have learned that sometimes you have to create the family you deserve rather than continuously fight for acceptance in one that cannot see your worth. 50. 56. This realization was not a swift, celebratory moment, but a slow, quiet dawn after a long night of storm. The emotional weight I had carried for years, the desperate need for approval, had been lifted. My life was calmer, cleaner, and anchored by the boundaries I had so painfully established. The first few months of this new equilibrium were defined by the absence of drama. Megan was immersed in her design program in Vancouver, and our communication was limited to polite short emails mostly regarding the repayment schedule she was surprisingly adhering to. Stephen, my father, remained a steady, supportive presence. We met weekly for coffee, not just to talk about the family, but about life books and work. He was making a visible effort, and that effort was genuine. It wasn't a transaction. The most challenging relationship was predictably with my mother, Karen. She communicated through a curated silence, punctuated by occasional sharply passive-aggressive texts. "Such a shame you'll miss Cousin Tyler's wedding. Everyone will ask about you, but I suppose some people choose to prioritize work over family." Or Stephen and I had the most wonderful time visiting Megan in Vancouver last week. She said the city is just magical. Too bad you couldn't make it, but I understand how busy the financial world is. I read them, acknowledged the intent, and deleted them without reply. Ryan, my best friend, called these her guilt grenades, and my new superpower was simply letting them explode harmlessly in the empty space where my insecurity used to be. The quiet, however, was about to be shattered not by a text message but by a legal document. One Tuesday morning, as I was reviewing market data, a registered letter arrived from a firm I didn't recognize, Carter and Blake, LLP. The letter had looked expensive, the paper thick and unforgiving. My stomach tightened instantly. My first thought was Megan in the co-signed lease, but I had definitively pulled my name. My second thought was a property dispute, but my condo was secure. I opened the heavy envelope with a sense of dread. The contents were not from Megan. They were from a financial institution, specifically a large, well-known regional bank that held the mortgage on my parents' family home, the very home whose kitchen I had helped renovate. The document was a formal notification of a default and accelerated payment demand. My parents were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The amount due immediately was substantial, not just the fees, but the entire remaining principal triggered by a clause in their refinancing agreement. The total figure was staggering over $420,000 USD, far beyond what Stephen could manage on his retirement income. But the real shock came in the final paragraph. It stated that the bank had been unable to serve notice directly to the primary mortgage holders, Stephen and Karen Morgan. And since I was listed as a secondary responsible party on the 30-year mortgage, they were notifying me. I gripped the paper until my knuckles were white. Secondary responsible party. I had never signed a mortgage. I had never even been asked. The only financial transaction I knew of was the one I helped fund the kitchen renovation. I immediately called Stephen. His number rang, went to voicemail, and then I was sent a generic text. "Can't talk right now, son. Everything's fine." The classic Stephen deflection. I felt the old poisonous feeling starting to creep back. The paralyzing fear of family chaos, the responsibility, and worst of all, the sickening suspicion of betrayal. Why was my name on a mortgage? And why had they refinanced without clearing that old archaic legal obligation? I called my friend Ryan, a paralegal who worked in corporate law, explaining the situation with the legal document still shaking in my hand. A secondary responsible party on a 30-year mortgage. "That's legally insane," Ryan said, his voice sharp with professional concern. "You couldn't legally sign a lease on a bouncy castle, let alone a mortgage. There has to be a clerical error or something far dirtier is going on." The letter states the original document listed Stephen Karen and E. Hayes Minor Morgan. My parents signed it on my behalf, apparently with a specific addendum regarding the collateral for the adoption costs. Ryan paused. The silence on the phone was heavy with implication. "Collateral for adoption costs. What does that mean?" I whispered. "I don't know." I whispered the word collateral, twisting the knife. "I'm going to find the original papers. I need to see exactly what they did." The logical part of my brain, the one that had built a career in finance and had established these new firm boundaries, screamed for me to call the law firm, deny any responsibility, and let the bank deal with my parents. It was their debt. It was their problem. But the emotional child inside me, the one who was bought and paid for, was screaming louder. If the bank forecloses, they lose their home. Their lives are ruined, and it will be your fault. The emotional manipulation, even if indirect, was working perfectly. This was Karen's new strategy. She wasn't just throwing guilt grenades anymore. She had deployed a nuclear financial bomb designed to force my involvement. She knew I would never let the house go into foreclosure, not because I loved the house, but because the principle of the matter, the sheer injustice of it, was designed to exploit my deep-seated sense of responsibility. I took the day off work and drove straight to my parents' house, the registered letter burning a hole in the passenger seat. The garage was open, but the driveway was empty. They were gone. I tried the key under the garden gnome, the one I had left untouched for months, and it turned smoothly. The house was spotless, quiet, almost staged. No dirty dishes, no laundry basket, overflow, no signs of a family in crisis. The air conditioning was set low. It was the calm before the storm. I went straight to Stephen's home office, a space usually locked and dusty. This time the door was slightly ajar. I scanned the room filing cabinets, a heavy oak desk, and a safe behind a framed print of a lighthouse. I knew the safe's combination. It was the adoption anniversary date, a date I had engraved on their last gift years ago. Hoping for some acknowledgement, I quickly turned the dial. 1977. Click. Inside the safe were old insurance policies, jewelry savings bonds, and a thick manila folder labeled E. Morgan Adoption Records. I pulled it out, my hands trembling uncontrollably. This was not the bank document I was looking for, but it felt far more important, far more dangerous. I sat down in Stephen's leather chair and opened the folder. Inside were the standard adoption decree's birth certificate with the new name, court papers, and a detailed breakdown of the legal fees. The original mortgage agreement was there too, tucked neatly at the bottom. The 3 signatures were unmistakable Stephen's Karen's and the tiny smudged X labeled E. Hayes signature witnessed. The collateral clause was specific. This was an old clause long thought irrelevant, but now activated as a legal mechanism to hold my parents accountable. The mortgage contained a rider stating that in the event of default, the cost of the adoption would be considered part of the liability assigned to the secondary party. It was a vicious, calculated trap. But my eyes caught something else, something I had never seen before tucked inside the file. It was a faded handwritten letter from the adoption agency dated 3 months after the adoption was finalized. It was addressed to Karen and Stephen Morgan, marked confidential. I unfolded the delicate paper, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't about money or paperwork. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, this letter serves as a final reminder regarding the required post-placement reporting. Our agency policy is explicit while the adoption is legally sealed. We strongly advise you maintain the open status agreed upon with the biological mother, Hannah Reed. She has made 2 written inquiries regarding Caleb's well-being and has attached a small handcrafted wooden toy. While we understand the desire for a clean break, please remember that Ms. Reed's financial circumstances were the sole reason for her relinquishment. She did not sign away the right to occasional updates. As the reports are overdue, she is currently pursuing legal counsel to enforce the visitation agreement outlined in the original 1997 settlement, which stipulates 2 supervised visits per year until Caleb reaches the age of 18. I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the thick carpet. This was the only backup copy my father had kept in the safe, carefully hidden by my mother for many years. Miss Hannah Reed, biological mother, visitation agreement. Every single thing I had ever been told about my adoption. That my biological mother was a ghost. A passing regret. Someone who wanted no contact was a deliberate, calculated lie. They hadn't just excluded me from a farewell dinner. They hadn't just used me for money. They had systematically eradicated an entire person from my life for 2 decades. A person who had fought not just to see me, but had established a legal agreement to be a part of my life. I stared at the words. The logic-driven financial strategist in me was completely obliterated. The conflict was no longer about a mortgage or a party. It was about the very foundation of my identity and the extent of my parents' deception. They hadn't just bought me. They had hidden the fact that someone else had wanted to keep me, and they were willing to risk everything, even their home, to keep that secret buried. The sound of a key in the back door lock made me jump. Stephen and Karen were home. I had less than 30 seconds to hide the evidence and process a lifetime of lies. I needed to know everything. My training in finance, which had taught me to function under extreme pressure and compartmentalized chaos, kicked in. Survival mode. I folded the letter about Hannah Reed precisely along its original creases, slid it deep into the manila folder, and tucked the folder under my sweater. I shoved the mortgage papers back into the safe, spun the dial, and secured the framed lighthouse print over it. The whole sequence took maybe 20 seconds. I stood up, adjusting my sweater and smoothing my hair just as the footsteps stopped outside the office door. Stephen entered first, looking pale and defeated, followed by Karen, whose face was a carefully constructed mask of irritation and exhaustion. "Caleb," Karen said, her voice laced with the artificial sweetness she used before dropping a hammer. "What are you doing here? Did you lose a key? We've been frantic." "Frantic," I echoed, letting just a sliver of the ice I felt inside color my voice. "I came because I received this." I pulled the bank's registered letter from my pocket and held it up. A notice of default and accelerated payment demand for your mortgage listing me as a secondary responsible party. Karen's careful mask fractured instantly. Her eyes darted from the letter to Stephen, a silent, furious exchange taking place. Stephen just slumped against the doorframe, unable to meet my gaze. "Oh, Caleb, please don't make a fuss." Karen sighed, massaging her temples. "It's just paperwork, a misunderstanding with the bank. We're handling it." "Handling it?" I took a slow, deliberate step forward, using my stature to dominate the small office space. "The total immediate payment demanded is over $4 million. Karen in the bank is notifying me because my signature or a fraudulent X made when I was 5 years old is attached to the original document linking me to your debt." "It's an old formality," Karen insisted, her voice rising in defensive hysteria. "It was just a requirement the agency had back then." "Stephen said we had to. It meant nothing. We would never let you be responsible." "You already have," I countered, my voice low and dangerous. "By putting the debt into default, your old formality has jeopardized my financial freedom, and my career as any hint of this will ruin my credit rating. And I am not talking about the money right now. I am talking about the lie." Stephen finally spoke, his voice thin. "Son, we were going to tell you eventually." "Eventually?" When the foreclosure notice was taped to the door, I shook my head, the gesture fueled by a cold, surgical fury. "You have always used money to control and manipulate. First, you taught me that my worth was defined by what I could give. Then you excluded me from a family dinner that I planned and paid for. Now you've tried to financially tether me to your failing life, a life I worked decades to become independent of all to avoid having an honest conversation." Karen stepped in front of Stephen, the ultimate shield. "How dare you? We raised you. We provided everything, Flo." I cut her off, my voice steady, professional, utterly devoid of warmth. "You accepted a child into your home and treated him like a perpetual investment that never paid the expected dividend. You provided conditions, not unconditional love, and your current situation. I believe this is a direct result of the financial stress Megan's move caused, the $8,900 I paid, which of course you had to replace when I pulled my support." The shot hit its mark. Karen flinched, her eyes widening. She hadn't expected the conversation to start here, nor had she expected me to be so composed. She had banked on the emotional collapse, the guilt, the immediate offer to fix it. "I have 2 demands," I stated, shifting from the emotional to the purely logical, the financial predator taking control. "You have until the end of the week to meet them, or I walk away completely and you lose the house. That's my ultimatum." Karen sputtered. "You wouldn't. That's cruel." "Cruel is letting a 5-year-old sign a legal document and then weaponizing that debt 28 years later. My demands are reasonable." I held up 2 fingers. First, I will pay the arrearage the 3 months you are behind to clear the default status and buy time. However, I will do this by taking legal control of the mortgage. I will refinance the loan entirely, but the deed must be immediately transferred solely into my name. You and Stephen will live here, but you will pay me market rent every month on time with a standard lease agreement. This house is now my asset, and you are my tenants. This is the only way to safeguard the equity and prevent foreclosure. The silence was deafening. Stephen looked slightly relieved, but Karen looked like I had physically slapped her. Losing the house was one thing. Losing control of it to the son she perpetually treated as a subordinate was unthinkable. "Never, Caleb," Karen hissed. "You're not taking our home." The bank and lawyers had already prepared the necessary documents, and my parents agreed to sign immediately to secure financial safety before any foreclosure. "It's either my terms or the bank's auctioneer," I stated coldly. "Choose now. But before you do, here is my second demand, which is non-negotiable regardless of your decision on the house." I pulled the manila folder from under my sweater and dropped it onto Stephen's desk. It made a sickening heavy thud. When I was looking for the mortgage papers, I found this. I continued tapping the folder, and I read the letter about Hannah Reed. The air instantly left the room. Karen went white, then a muted red. Stephen looked like a ghost. The financial pressure, the cruelty, the favoritism, all of it faded into insignificance compared to the sheer terror this name evoked. That woman signed a legal visitation agreement. I articulated slowly, emphasizing every word. She wanted to be a part of my life. And for 28 years you both lied to me, telling me she wanted nothing to do with me. You eradicated an entire person from my history. This is not about a financial agreement anymore. This is about my life, my identity, and your monumental betrayal. Karen reached for the folder, but I slammed my hand down on it. "Do not touch it. My second demand is this. You will immediately provide me with every single piece of correspondence, every address, every phone number, and every document related to Hannah Reed. From the moment you adopted me until today, I want the truth unvarnished and complete by tomorrow morning." I looked directly at Karen, whose composure had utterly collapsed into naked fear. "You hid the one person who wanted to be my family without a price tag attached. You hid my sister's love. You hid my heritage. You did this because the real adoption arrangement did not suit your narrative of perfect parents adopting a desperate orphan. You traded money for my entire identity." I gave them no time to respond. I pulled a small, expensive-looking moleskin notebook from my jacket pocket, tore out a clean sheet, and wrote down my demands, the property transfer, and the delivery of all Reed documentation. I signed it with a flourish. "The clock starts now," I said, walking to the door. I paused with my hand on the knob and turned back, looking Stephen in the eye. "I need one final piece of information. You and Karen will give it to me honestly. Where is Hannah Reed now?" Stephen swallowed hard, his eyes still wide with shock. "She moved away from the city years ago. We heard she was working in a small remote town in the mountains up near the Canadian border, Pine Summit or something like that. She opened a small craft store." I nodded, the information settling in my mind like a new coordinate on a map. "Thank you, Stephen. At least you told me the truth this time." I did not say goodbye. I walked out, leaving the two of them frozen in their office, the mortgage document and the adoption folder serving as twin monuments to their decades of lies. As soon as I got back to my condo, I called Ryan. "I have the name Hannah Reed. I need you to run a search. Every address, every court record, every lead you can find. I also need you to draft a new mortgage agreement and a tenant lease for the house immediately. My parents are transferring the deed." "The deed, Caleb? Are you sure?" Ryan asked, stunned. "You are taking ownership of the debt." "I am taking ownership of the only leverage I have left," I corrected him. "The house is the price they pay for their deception.
But the real prize, Ryan, is the truth. They lied about my biological mother. The woman wanted to see me, and they silenced her and me.
I need to find her. Ryan promised to start immediately. I canceled all my meetings for the rest of the week. My focus was now singular. Find Hannah Reed. The next morning, as I expected, Karen's name flashed on my phone. I did not answer. Moments later, I received a torrent of texts pleading manipulative and finally raging. They were trying every trick they knew. Then a heavy envelope was slipped under my door. I knew without opening it that it contained the Reed file. I sat down at my dining table and spread out the documents, birth records, court filings, agency letters, a horrifying paper trail of deception. Tucked between the pages was a small, dusty piece of paper, a torn postcard of a misty mountain view. On the back, written in a neat, slightly shaky hand, were 3 words and a small sketch of a pine tree. The words were "The Aspen Thread." The sketch was accompanied by an address, 480 Main Street, Maple Ridge, NH. It was not Pine Summit, but it was a small mountain town near the border. It was an art studio, a craft store, the Aspen Thread. My first family had silenced a weaver, a creator. I closed my eyes, a single devastating thought crystallizing in my mind. My adoption was not just a transaction. It was a kidnapping of the heart. I picked up my phone and dialed Stephen. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight with anticipation. "Caleb, did you read the file?" "I read everything," I confirmed. "I have the address for Hannah Reed in Maple Ridge, New Hampshire." A beat of silence. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to finish what you started." I told him my resolve steel hard. "I am leaving tonight. I am going to meet her. But first there is one last thing I need you to do for me, Stephen. And you will do it because the legal papers for the deed transfer will be finalized Monday morning." "Anything, son. Anything. I need you to come with me." The conflict was external. The debt, the house, the lies. But the final desperate move was internal. I was seeking not just a biological connection, but a witness, an accomplice, a father who could finally break free from his controlling wife and stand with the son he had perpetually betrayed. "I need you to drive with me to Maple Ridge," I repeated. "I want you there when I meet her. You will face the truth you buried, and you will introduce me to the woman you told me was a ghost." A long, agonizing pause stretched across the line. It was the hardest decision of Stephen's life. Betray his wife's lifetime of secrecy or risk losing his son forever. I will be there," Stephen whispered. "I will be at your condo in an hour." I hung up. I had the truth, the leverage, and now an unlikely guilt-ridden companion. The road to finding Hannah Reed was paved with the ruins of the family I had always known. The next chapter would be about building something entirely new, or collapsing under the weight of the old lies. The drive to Maple Ridge would tell me everything. I need you to tell me about the drive to Maple Ridge.